There is a strange phenomenon that happens to a lot of us right around the time we hit our late 40s or early 50s. We finally reach our peak earning years. The career is established. The kids are getting a little more independent. And for the first time, you might feel like you can finally breathe financially. But this exact window, the 10 to 15 years before you plan to retire, is also the most dangerous phase of your financial life. Why? Because the decisions you make during this specific decade have a multiplier effect. Make the right moves, and you could shave years off your working life. But stumble into a few common, highly tempting financial traps, and you might accidentally sign yourself up for another decade of mandatory morning commutes, stressful meetings, and asking for time off. Today, we are going to talk about 5 money mistakes that can easily add 10 years to your working life. And I want to be clear right out of the gate, these aren't foolish mistakes. They aren't wild Vegas bets or getting scammed on the internet. In fact, most of these mistakes are made by incredibly smart, hardworking people who are simply doing what feels right in the moment. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder that I'm here to share educational concepts and ideas to get you thinking. Everyone's financial fingerprint is unique, so this isn't personalized financial advice. Always consult with a professional who knows your specific situation before making major moves. Let's get into it. Mistake number 1. The I deserve it lifestyle upgrade. You've worked incredibly hard for the last 25 years. You've navigated economic downturns, paid your dues, and now you're finally making the kind of money you used to dream about. It is entirely natural to look around and think, I've earned a reward. Maybe it's trading in the reliable sedan for a luxury SUV with a hefty monthly payment. Maybe it's buying the bigger house with the pool, or doing a massive, top-of-the-line kitchen renovation that requires tapping into your home equity. Here is the problem. When you increase your standard of living in your 50s, you aren't just spending money today. You are permanently raising the baseline of what it costs to be you. Let's look at how this impacts your retirement timeline. In the financial world, many planners use a general guideline often referred to as the 4% rule. As a rough estimate, it suggests that for every $1,000 a month you need in retirement, you need to have saved about $300,000. So, if you upgrade your lifestyle in your 50s and permanently add just $2.00 a month to your baseline expenses, between a higher car payment, higher property taxes on a bigger house, and elevated spending habits, you don't just have to pay for those things right now. You now need to save an additional $600,000 just to maintain that new lifestyle when you stop working. How long does it take the average person to save up an extra $600,000? For many, it's about a decade. The people who are able to retire on their own terms, in their early 60s or even 50s, usually do something very specific during their peak earning years. They freeze their lifestyle. When the big raises and bonuses come in, their standard of living stays exactly the same. Instead of buying a bigger house, they buy their freedom. They aggressively funnel that peak earning surplus into their retirement accounts, essentially buying back years of their life. Mistake number 2. The sandwich generation sacrifice. This is perhaps the most emotionally difficult mistake on the list. And it happens because you have a good heart. If you are in your late 40s or 50s, you are likely part of the sandwich generation. You are caught in the middle, potentially caring for aging parents on one side and supporting young adult children on the other. The mistake happens when you prioritize your adult children's financial launch over your own retirement landing. It looks like co-signing massive student loans, pulling money out of your 401(k) to pay for an out-of-state dream college, covering their rent in an expensive city after graduation, or draining your savings to help them with a down payment on a house. As a parent, your instinct is to protect your kids and give them a head start. But mathematically, you are putting yourself in a highly precarious position. Think about it like the safety briefing on an airplane. Put your own oxygen mask on first before assisting others. Why do they say that? Because if you pass out, you become a burden to the people around you, and you can't help anyone. The financial equivalent is this. Your children have 40 years to pay off a student loan, build their savings, and increase their income. You only have a few years left to fund your retirement. There are scholarships, grants, and loans for college. There are no scholarships for retirement. If you derail your compounding interest during your most critical saving years to fund your adult children's lifestyle, you will inevitably have to work much longer to make up the deficit. Or worse, you might run out of money in your 70s or 80s. And here is the harsh truth that can help reframe this guilt. The absolute greatest financial gift you can ever give your children is the absolute certainty that they will never have to financially support you when you are old. Setting healthy financial boundaries with your kids today ensures you don't become their financial responsibility tomorrow. Mistake number 3. Hitting the brakes too early. Imagine you are driving on the highway at 70 miles per hour, and you know your exit is coming up in 5 miles. You wouldn't slam on the brakes and drop your speed to 10 miles per hour right there in the middle lane, would you? You'd get rear-ended. You have to maintain an appropriate speed until you actually reach the off-ramp. A lot of people do the financial equivalent of slamming on the brakes when they cross the age of 50. They look at their retirement accounts, realize they have accumulated a decent nest egg, and suddenly become terrified of losing it. They remember the market crash of 2008 or the volatility of 2020. Driven by a desire to protect what they've built, they move everything into cash, CDs, or very conservative bonds way too early. They think they are playing it safe. In reality, they are exposing themselves to one of the most silent and destructive forces in finance: inflation. If you retire at 62, there is a very good chance you or your spouse could live into your early 90s. That is a 30-year retirement. Over a 30-year period, the cost of groceries, utilities, taxes, and healthcare isn't going to stay flat. If historical averages hold, the cost of living could easily double or more during your retirement. If your money is sitting entirely in safe, cash vehicles that aren't keeping up with the true cost of living, your purchasing power will slowly bleed out. You might reach age 65 and realize that because your portfolio hasn't grown in a decade, you simply don't have enough to sustain yourself, forcing you to keep your desk job until you're 70. Yes, as you approach retirement, you should absolutely adjust your risk. You don't want to be 100% invested in volatile speculative stocks, but you still need an engine for growth. Many successful retirees use a bucket strategy, where they keep the money they need for the next few years in safe, liquid assets, while leaving the money they won't need for 10 or 20 years invested in a diversified portfolio to outpace inflation. Don't let the fear of short-term market drops force you into the long-term guarantee of losing your purchasing power. Mistake number 4. The healthcare gap year blind spot. Let's say you've done everything right. You saved aggressively, you lived below your means, you invested wisely, and at age 58, you look at a spreadsheet and realize, I have enough money. I can quit today. So you hand in your resignation, feeling on top of the world. And then, a few weeks later, you start looking into private health insurance for you and your spouse. That is when the cold reality hits. In the United States, Medicare eligibility generally begins at age 65. If you retire at 58, you have a 7-year gap where you are entirely responsible for your own health insurance. When you were working, your employer was likely subsidizing a massive portion of your monthly premiums. Once you leave, the full weight of that cost falls on you. For a married couple in their late 50s or early 60s, comprehensive private health insurance premiums on the open market can easily range from $500 to over $2,500 a month, depending on where you live and the coverage you need. Add in deductibles, out-of-pocket maximums, and copays, and you could easily be looking at spending $20,000 to $30,000 a year just on healthcare. Over a 7-year gap, that's $140,000 to $210,000 walking right out the door before you've bought a single bag of groceries or paid a utility bill. This oversight forces countless people back into the workforce. They don't go back because they miss the work. They go back purely to get the health benefits. If you want to avoid this decade-delaying trap, you have to plan for the gap years right now. Research the Affordable Care Act health insurance marketplace in your state to get a realistic estimate of premiums. Look into building up a health savings account if you have access to one, which allows you to save money tax-free specifically for medical expenses. Do not let healthcare costs be the surprise that forces you back to the morning commute. And finally, mistake number 5, resetting the debt clock. When we dream about retirement, we usually picture the fun stuff: traveling, gardening, visiting grandkids, or just drinking coffee on the porch on a Tuesday morning. What we don't picture is waking up on the first of the month and having to write a $3,000 check for a mortgage, a $700 check for a car payment, and sending $400 to a credit card company. Retirement is fundamentally about cash flow. It's about ensuring the money coming in is greater than the money going out. The higher your fixed mandatory expenses are, the more stress you will have, and the longer you will have to work to build a portfolio large enough to cover those bills. The mistake often happens in the mid-50s. You decide to do that massive home renovation, or maybe you downsize your space but move to a much higher-end luxury community, and you take out a brand new 30-year mortgage at age 55. Or you start carrying rolling credit card debt because you're helping with your kids' expenses and maintaining a high lifestyle. When you sign a 30-year mortgage at 55, you are agreeing to make a mandatory payment every single month until you are 85 years old. Debt in retirement is a portfolio killer. If you need $3,000 a month just to cover a mortgage, you have to withdraw that money from your retirement accounts. If the stock market is down that year, you are forced to sell your investments at a loss just to pay the bank. On top of that, pulling more money out of traditional 401(k) or IRAs increases your taxable income, meaning you have to pull out even more just to pay the IRS. It's a vicious cycle. People who smoothly transition into a stress-free early retirement actively attack their debt in the 10 years before they stop working. They aim to have the cars paid off, the credit cards at zero, and ideally, a clear line of sight to a paid-off mortgage. When you don't owe anyone anything, your cost of living plummets. When your cost of living plummets, the amount of wealth you need to retire drops dramatically. Paying off debt isn't just about saving interest, it is literally buying your time back. So, let's look at the bottom line. When you look at these 5 mistakes: upgrading your lifestyle at peak earnings, funding adult kids at your own expense, pulling out of the market out of fear, ignoring the healthcare gap, and resetting the debt clock, they all have one thing in common. They all increase the burden on your future self. Financial planning in your 45 to 60 window is essentially a negotiation between the you of today and the you of tomorrow. Every time you say no to unnecessary debt, set a healthy boundary with your kids, or bank a raise instead of spending it, you are handing a gift to your future self. You are handing them another year of freedom. It is never too late to course correct. Even if you've made a couple of these mistakes, recognizing them today gives you the power to pivot tomorrow. I'm curious to hear from you. Which of these traps do you think is the easiest to fall into? Or which one felt a little like looking in the mirror today? Let me know down in the comments. I always love reading through your perspectives because we are all navigating this together. If this gave you some things to think about regarding your own retirement runway, consider hitting the subscribe button so we can keep the conversation going in the next video. Take care of yourselves, Keep planning for that future, and I'll see you next time.